Welcome, everybody. I'm John Barron from Word on Fire Catholic Ministries, and what we are doing today is seizing an opportunity. I'm here in Orlando, Florida, where the Good News Conference is about to get underway, and the two men who are delivering the keynote addresses at this very large gathering of Catholics just happen to be with me now. We've got Bishop Robert Barron and Father Mike Schmitz, and it's no doubt that they are maybe predominantly responsible for the fact that this conference is sold out at this point. So everybody is thrilled and looking forward to seeing you two over the weekend. They, of course, are two of the most prominent and most widely followed Catholic churchmen in the U.S. They are master evangelists, speakers, authors. Bishop Barron is, of course, the founder of Word on Fire, and everybody knows Father Mike from his ubiquitous, energized, and very smart videos. Not to mention the Bible in a Year podcast, which earlier this year became the #1 podcast in the world and has held pretty steady since then. And though they are appearing on different days at this conference, we knew we couldn't pass up the chance to find some time to get them together for a conversation. Thanks to Father Mike and Bishop for making the time to make this happen. And here we go. Unrehearsed, unedited, unvarnished. Hopefully interesting conversation with two great leaders. I just talked about where you guys are now, what has developed with your careers, but I'm wondering if we can go back a little bit to the beginning. When you kind of first felt that something click inside of you, where you knew that something more important was happening with you with your Catholic faith, something that probably ultimately put you on the path to the priesthood. And I think in both cases something happened during the high school years. So, Father Mike?
Yeah, no, I thank you, and this is an incredible honor. For years, I've referred to myself as the poor man's Father Barron, and so this is. No, I can't say that anymore because I can't be the poor man's Bishop Barron. That's just the poor man's Father Barron. But back in so I was raised Catholic, and I'm the fourth of 6 kids, and so Sunday Mass every single Sunday, and I would always say that in Catholic elementary school that I didn't like it. I didn't like going to church. But you could only, in my family, could only miss Mass if you were too sick to do anything else for the rest of the day. And so there were times where I attempted, but it's hard to get away with that when your mom's a nurse and your dad's a doctor. I fooled them a couple times. I don't think they were fooled. But at one point, when I was about 15 or so, I had this conviction. It's only an act of God's grace because I had this conviction, this awareness of personal sin. And it wasn't like anyone came into my life and pointed it out. Mm-hmm. It was, well, I know what the sins are because I went to Catholic school. I went to, go to Mass on Sunday. But all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, that's what I've done. And I remember thinking so clearly, I can't save myself. I need a savior. And it was ding, kind of one of those light bulbs of, oh my gosh, everything. They've given me the answer my entire life, but I never cared about the question. Mm. And so now all of a sudden I have the question, and the question is really, I'm desperate for an answer, and I have it automatically. And so I knew 2 things. I knew, one is I needed to pray, and I didn't know how to pray. And so I remember I had a rosary hanging on the bedpost, and my mom would pray the rosary every night, but I wasn't going to ask her, Mom, how do you pray the rosary? Because I thought she would freak out. And so I just thought, I went to a religious set on Wednesday night, and Mrs. Sophie Hagelin was our teacher, and there was this booklet called Youth Praise the Rosary. And I said, Mrs. Hagelin, can I borrow that booklet? Like, sure, you can have it, take it forever. And so I would have the booklet, have my rosary, and that's how I started learning how to pray. And then I knew I needed to go to confession, and I didn't know the rules as far as Saturdays, and that's when you have confession. But I knew where the priest lived, so I got on my bike and I rode across town and knocked on the door at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and he was there. And I always say he was there because priests only work 1 day a week. And I said, Father, can I go to confession? Sure, come on in. I went to confession, and I remember walking out of that rectory, and I had 3 clear thoughts in my head. My first was, God, thank you so much. I was just overwhelmed by gratitude of I walked in here with all this sin, and I'm walking out completely forgiven because of you, Jesus. Thank you so much. My second thought was, God, if you want me to be a priest, I'll hear anyone's confession anytime they ask. And I'd never thought about being a priest before, because if you don't like church, you don't think about being a priest too often. And my third thought was, thank you, God. Second thought, if I'm going to be a priest, I'll hear anyone's confession anytime they ask. My third thought was, oh, she's really cute. Like, so that's set up the roller coaster of junior high, high school, whatever, college, of just kind of, God, what do you want me to do? But that was the beginning.
Yeah.
And where all of a sudden, everything they had been telling me mattered to me deeply. And it was the beginning. It was incredible.
Yeah. Well, and you had a similar encounter with grace in high school.
And you were right down the hall at the time.
Yeah.
But, first of all, most of my life I've been in seminary work, and so I've heard 1,000 stories of vocation and call. And I never tire them because I'm always fascinated by how God tailors his grace to a particular person. So Flannery O'Connor talks about the breakthrough of grace that happens in people's lives. And in the case of priests, it happens in a particular way, a very unique way. And so that was the way the Lord found, your heart. Mine was at Fenwick High School. I say John was down the hall because he was a year ahead of me at Fenwick. And it was early in the afternoon, and we were just in from the playground, as I remember. So it's all these sweaty guys. Fenwick was an all-guys school at the time. And this young Dominican friar taught us one of Aquinas' arguments for God's existence. And it's sort of like you. I'm born and raised a Catholic. I went to Mass every Sunday, and I never doubted God's existence. But I never thought about it deeply. Never thought you could think about it deeply. And I don't know why. For some reason, it just hit me with an extraordinary power of the reality of God. And I started looking for books. This is, of course, long before the internet. And I went to our library and found this big tome on Thomas Aquinas, and tried to start reading this thing. And I didn't really understand it, but I was fascinated by it. And that's how God kind of broke into my life, though he was present to me, of course, as a Catholic kid. But that's the moment when things kind of, awakened in me. And that started me on the path, no kidding, that I'm still on. And when I chose my motto as a bishop, I chose Aquinas', non nisi te domine, I'll have nothing except you. And Aquinas has followed me all my life. So I think of it, really, I think God's grace happened through a saint, through Aquinas, who kind of broke into my life and said, okay, I want you to do something. That's how it started for me.
That's incredible. Yeah. It's funny, you mentioned even just finding books.
Yeah.
I'll go back to my mom. Kind of like when I talk to our students, I say, how your moms have a stack of books that they want to read someday, a stack of magazines they want to read someday? Yeah. And they're all like, yeah. Like, that's my mom. She had all these Catholic books, these Catholic magazines, and tapes. And that was, I thought, well, what do I do now? And then, I'll borrow this book and this book. And through that, just reading those books, listening to those tapes, realizing, like you had mentioned, there's a way to think even more deeply about this. And I remember even just encountering the reality of the Eucharist, how Jesus is truly present. And I don't want to say I freaked out, I flipped out. But I remember running downstairs into the kitchen and to my siblings, do you know that Jesus is really present in the Eucharist? They're like, yeah. They're like, yeah. I said, no, that's really him. We know, moron. And I don't know if I was sick that day, or what, but that just was this, then I need to be close to him. Yeah. Because that's where he is. And it just hit. Yeah, incredible.
Did it become a voracious reading experience?
I read so much, yeah. It was just such a gift. So my best friends became people I didn't. See, this is why the poor man's Father Barron, because I didn't go to Aquinas. I went to people who learned from Aquinas. So I love Dr. Peter Kraft. Yeah, was so significant. Bishop Fulton Sheen was so significant. C.S. Lewis. These people who made big concepts really accessible.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about Fulton Sheen, because so here I am, 14, 15 years old, and I get this big tome of Thomas Aquinas, and I'm trying to read it, and my father, our father, said to me, kiddo, maybe you could find something a little easier. And he mentioned Fulton Sheen.
Yeah.
So I went to the library and got this Fulton Sheen book, which did indeed make a lot of that
exactly.
Easier. But reading was so important to me. That was a way in, which is why a lot of my work has been against this anti-intellectualism, which held sway, believe me, when I was a young guy. There was almost an animus against the intellectual life. And that's terrible in my judgment. That's the way I got into it.
Right.
That's what, and people, you mentioned Kraft. There's a whole generation of people, your age and younger, who were drawn back to the faith by Peter Kraft.
Oh, he's been so significant.
He was an extraordinary teacher and a great writer. But books have played from, look at Augustine on, such a huge role in people's journey to the Lord.
Yeah, I would say that, and the kind of people that I was drawn to, I think are the kind of people, as we continue to talk, the people I emulate. And so I remember C.S. Lewis at one point, he was giving a talk to, I think it was seminarians, and I think it was called, they might have referred to themselves as youth ministers or youth pastors or something in the Anglican Church. And he said that he believed the final exam for people for the Anglican men before they get ordained shouldn't be answering big theological topics in a big theological way. It should be, here's a big theological topic, communicate this in a way that the ordinary dock worker can understand. And he said, because if you can't do that, we wouldn't send you to Burma if you didn't speak Burmese. We wouldn't send you to China as a missionary if you didn't speak Chinese. And so why would we send you to South London if you don't know how to communicate in such a way that the people living in South London could understand you?
I think I do remember that vaguely in Lewis, and it reminds me of Billy Graham said something similar. Right. Namely, he said, any Christian preacher at the drop of a hat should be able to explain the gospel to any group that shows up. So if there's your church or whatever it is, hey, Bishop, a group of 6-year-olds have shown up. Okay, you should be able to drop a hat to explain the gospel to them.
Yeah.
Bishop, a group of academics from Villanova have shown up. Explain the gospel to them. If you can't do that at the drop of a hat, you're not qualified.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that's right. Like, what is the gospel, and can you explain it to any group at any level?
Without dumbing it down.
Yeah, right. I'm doing it with integrity, but able to address people at different levels and all that. I think that is true.
What's your reading like now? Still as voracious?
I listen a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So audible.com is, I think I keep them in business. Right. I just, there are some books that I just have found have been so incredibly helpful. Ralph Martin's book, Fulfillment of All Desire. I don't know if I've read I think it's a modern classic. I think that it probably will. Have you?
Yeah, sure, read it years ago.
I just thought I'm on my 6th or 7th read through of that, or listen through of that, because it's just one of those where I keep coming back to it. And it's one of those books that reminds me of, here's the interior life, and here's the point of everything we're going through. Also, I think sometimes what I can fall into is I can fall into the trap of, okay, here's where I'm at when it comes to relationship with the Lord and the process of Him hopefully purifying and sanctifying me. And I can forget a little bit that this is a continuum, that this is a journey, that this is not the only stage, is the one I'm at, kind of a little bit of interior solipsism. And so it's been a gift to be able to be reminded of, just how God works in the soul.
Mm-hmm. And your reading is still voracious?
Yeah, my eyes are getting worse. As I get older, I can't read the way I used to, but no, I read all the time.
Audible.
I do. In fact, I'm in, Santa Barbara, and I have to drive all the time to LA and around my region. So I've gotten into the Audible books. In fact, I tried the Brothers Karamazov in my life, I think 3 separate times, never got through it, trying to read it.
Yeah.
Finally just got a really good Audible with a great narrator, got my way through it.
Yeah,
so I've listened to all kinds of big novels.
I did the same thing with Brothers Karamazov.
Really?
Like, I haven't read it. I've listened. So I say I read it even if I listened to it.
No, but that's better in many ways when you listen through a novel, especially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bishop has mentioned a couple times that we were in high school together, and I should have mentioned that we are brothers. I'm his slightly older brother. So forgive me if I occasionally call him Bob along the way. But you guys both have important day jobs, and you're busy with that. You're both terrific with, traditional preaching. But from the very beginning, you both have been unafraid to engage the culture, to engage with pop culture, to offer Catholic perspectives on everything from current movies and music and other societal trends. It's been very effective, I think, and I think it's brought different people in who might not have otherwise clued themselves into a podcast from a Catholic priest. But why is that important in evangelization?
It's just an intuition I had from the beginning that they're not coming as readily to us. So that's been proven now over and over again, the rise of the nun, so-called, and people are disaffiliating from the church. So if we simply say, let's get our parish programs in better shape and invite people in, well, they're not coming. We have to go get them. And right at that time, as the nuns were increasing, the social media was emerging. And I thought, well, here's a tool. Here's a way we can get into the world of people that wouldn't come naturally to church. Okay, if that's true, then how do you get them? Well, maybe not by leading with, the essence, existence, distinction, and Thomas Aquinas. Maybe lead with, as I did in the very beginning with YouTube commentaries, with movies. Movies and music are places where young people are, and so I started with that. And it was an experiment. I didn't know. When we first started YouTube, it was 2007. And Who's going to watch? No idea. In the beginning, I remember very vividly when we reached 300 views in a video, and we're like, no, really? 300? People watched our video? Wow, So it was an experiment that I think worked, and I think we both had that experience.
Yeah.
You try this, and people do respond, and it's a way to get some traction and plant some seeds, and we've both seen them grow in all kinds of marvelous ways. So I think it's an experiment that paid off.
And so you were with your videos a little bit later, but still with that underlying interest often in pop culture.
Yeah, it's interesting because Bishop, you've talked about Bob Dylan and movies. I've only referenced, or I've only kind of taken a dive into movies occasionally. And it's usually because it's a movie that I really was moved by, or I think well, this could resonate with maybe some other people. But it's one of those elements of, I think when it comes to evangelization, there's this whole movement of pre-evangelization, or this step of pre-evangelization. And I think that the critical element of pre-evangelization is it's there to build relationship where there's trust. And I think that when there's that consistency of you show up, you're on someone's phone or on the computer, and you're talking about things in a way that is not bombastic, in a way that is kind of winsome, in a way that just like, oh, this person really believes this. Then even if someone disagrees with you on this or that topic, there's an element of trust that I think begins. Yeah. And like you mentioned, planting seeds. I think one of those seeds that's planted is, they at least seem authentic, even if I disagree.
Yeah.
And so I believe I can trust that they are representing what the gospel is. They're representing what the church teaches, and that's a good beginning.
Yeah, I quite agree with that. And they call the sticky quality of the internet, where you put a video out, and maybe that's not quite my thing, but it sticks them to another video that you did, and that one, that's interesting. That leads me to another one. And I have tons of stories, I'm sure you do too, of people that started with some video of mine that they just stumbled upon somehow. And it led them by this circuitous route to the RCIA program, So that's what I mean about the planting of the seeds and taking advantage of this real sticky quality of the internet. I love that. I think what you said about trust is dead right too, that, hey, that guy seems normal, and he seems happy, and he seems like not a complete nerd, and so maybe I'll spend a little time with him. The other thing about I don't know about your experience, but in the early days, what surprised me a lot, the negative comments. I didn't even know people could comment on these things, and I put a video out about something, and what? I'm learning these comments of people that are mad at me and the church and God, but especially in the early days, I learned it's a way in. I get some traction. Like, okay, hey, listen, tell me exactly what you don't like about this, or that's a good point you're making, but I think you're wrong about. And it allowed you at least to start a conversation.
And sometimes
engagement. They were really good conversations would unfold. And again, here's someone that would never darken the door of any of our institutions or our churches, but I'm able, at that time a Catholic priest, to have a conversation with this non-believer or skeptic or whatever. So those are all great things about it, I think.
Yeah, and also I like how it's connected. So I'll get a lot of messages, letters, emails saying, I found your videos, and then I found Bishop Barron, and then I found Matt Fradd in Pints with Aquinas, and then I found, and now I'm finding myself in RCIA. Like you mentioned, how sticky things are, and how it's not just one person or one ministry, but it's this kind of working together without even working together.
Yeah.
But it's the Lord just keeps leading people, because I know that I have a lane, and the lane won't go all the way to the finish line. The lane will help someone get to the next person. That's the next person will hopefully get them to the finish line.
Yeah, and as you say, the Lord is working. That's the mysterious thing, is that we were in different ways, I think, chosen and directed, and then the Lord does His work. And I just use the image of the sowing of the seeds all the time, because the kind of work we do, you don't know where these things are going to land. I finish a video in my studio, and I'll say, okay, yeah, good, got that one done, and off we go. And you have no idea. It could be years later, somebody watches that video at the right time, and it does something.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. You sort of let that go and say, okay, now Lord, you supervise this process.
Yeah. Maybe there's times when I'll be so excited. Oh, this was awesome. I love this idea. Isn't that great? And then I'm watching the numbers sometimes thinking, what,
Like,
you guys,
that one bombed,
doesn't this hurt your heart? Hit your heart?
Yeah.
Doesn't it kind of lift your spirit up?
That's the other side. It's like, that was really good. And actually, it wasn't.
Pearls before swine.
Yeah, just going back to evangelizing a little bit through the lens of culture.
Yeah.
I think what's been interesting is giving viewers the that idea that there is a Catholic perspective that can be brought to bear on many artifacts in pop culture, and giving them a vocabulary or a code to understand that. Can you talk about that a little bit? And maybe, tell us what are some of your favorite Catholic movies that we might not have even realized were Catholic movies?
Well, and again, when I say Catholic, I just mean here one that I think is susceptible to a very Catholicizing interpretation. And my favorite example, I just saw it the other night. It was on TV. Clint Eastwood's Gran Torino, which is people know because they go, "Get off my lawn." That's what they remember about that movie. But that movie, in my judgment, is the best exemplification of the Christus Victor theory of redemption, namely that Jesus conquers the devil, tricks the devil, exposes the devil, and in that very act also liberates those under the sway of the devil. I won't go into all the details of the movie, but Clint Eastwood, this very unlikely Christ figure, but makes a move at the end of that movie that simultaneously exposes wickedness to the light and to justice and liberates by an act of self-sacrificing love, even to the point of death. So there's a good example. I watched that movie. I like Clint Eastwood's movies, and I went into it with no expectation whatsoever of seeing a religious movie. When it ended, I thought, my God, I'm going to use this forever to explain the Christus Victor theory. I don't know a better exemplification of it. So I did a video on that, and okay, there's a Catholic vision of life. Now, I don't think about Clint Eastwood's formation. I don't know if he had that in his mind or what, but there it is, unmistakably. And I think if you've got the Catholic lenses on, you can see that in a film. The very first commentary I did on YouTube was on Scorsese's The Departed. Now, Scorsese is an ambiguous figure in terms of his own Catholicism, but he's a Catholic formed by Catholicism. And that movie, too, I think has a lot of motifs of sin, of death, of redemption, etc. So our job, I think, is to say, okay, if you look at the world with Catholic lenses, you can see it in a particular way. And I think that is a good way to start.
Yeah, I would say that I've never seen The Departed, which is tragic, I guess. But I did see Gran Torino.
On the plane. Look, on the plane home today.
I should,
tomorrow.
because are you a cop? I'm not a cop. I know that part. But the
Gran Torino.
Gran Torino is, so, like you mentioned so clearly, that one of my favorite movies is, I think it's the IMDb #1 movie of all time. Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, right.
Which
Great
is
Christ imagery.
Exactly, and it permeates the whole thing. Innocent man, falsely accused, falsely convicted, but free in pressure and time. All the themes. Every beat of that movie, I think, is incredible. I had last Christmas, my Christmas homily, I said that the best Christmas movie of all time, in my opinion, is the movie Taken, with Liam Neeson.
Oh, gosh.
And like, what? Christmas movie? And like, well, no, it's the story of...
I've got certain skills.
Exactly, a very particular set of skills.
Yeah.
That his daughter's taken.
Yeah.
And what is the father who will do anything, whatever it takes, to get his daughter back? Obviously, it's not a Christmas movie. But the reality is, here is another image of Christ the Victor, who is also willing to leave comfort, willing to leave security, willing to leave heaven in many ways to do what? To rescue us, to rescue his children who have been, because of their own foolishness and folly,
have been taken power.
By the strong man. And so,
I think and I love Shawshank for that reason. And I think the final scene, when Red finally comes to see him on the beach, and there he is, all in white, and he's by the boat, so it's all and by the seashore.
Yeah.
So it's very, and then the embrace at the end. But the innocent man that moves into this world of dysfunction and fully participating
isn't corrupted by it.
Right, but then shows them a way out, a path forward, then goes through a kind of death and resurrection, and then at the end of time welcomes the prisoner that's finally... And of course, Stephen King, who wrote the story upon which that's based, does indeed have a Christian imagination, certainly. So yeah, and as you say, maybe the most popular movie of the last 50 years, and it's full of Christianity.
Yeah.
This is Siskel and Ebert for the religiously inclined. But you know, both of you have come to prominence using new media. You know, video, podcasts, the internet, digital distribution, all that. Now, new media is probably a term that became quaint a month after it was coined. You know, it's the media at this point. You know, was there something more effective or different about new media back in the day or even now compared to old media, books or preaching from the pulpit? Is there something that makes that different, more useful, more efficient using, you know, the digital realm?
Well, I think I remember talking with one of our students, and he was tricking out his mom's minivan. And he said he had taken out all the seats and reupholstered all of them. He had made a whole new molding for a dashboard, and he had taken out the carpets. He did stuff with the engine. He had done all these things. And I said, did you grow up working on cars? I was like, no, there's a YouTube tutorial. And I said, what? And he said, no, this, you know, we're the tutorial generation. And I said, I love that, because that in so many ways is the thing. And that's one of the reasons why Ascension came to me and said, would you want to go on YouTube and do these videos, because that's where a whole generation of people are living. That's where they're going for their information. And I said, yeah, that's essential. That idea that I have a question, I can type it into this machine, this magical rectangle I've got in my pocket, and maybe come up with some kind of answer. And I think that, if anything, that I've recognized has been the new media is that it's an answer to people's questions.
Yeah, I think of years ago when Cardinal George invited me to do work in evangelization. And he said, I want you to evangelize the culture. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I don't know exactly, but we'll figure it out, right? So the first move we made was I gathered in these nice rooms in downtown Chicago, and we had business people on their lunch hour would come. We'd serve them lunch. I'd give a brief, half-hour talk, and then back to work. That was the idea. And they were successful. We filled these rooms with people, and I think they were good. So that year ended, and I talked to Cardinal George, and I said, well, you know, Your Eminence, I think they were good. I think they were fruitful. But I said, there's something kind of 19th century about this. It's what John Henry Newman would have done.
Yeah.
Let's gather people in a room and give a formal lecture. I said, there's so much more we could do with at the time, the new media. He said, I know nothing about that, but I think you're probably right. So that's really where we got the start with Word on Fire, is to do what I was doing in those rooms, but now to a much wider world. And the opportunity for connection, that's the great thing about it. You can connect with people. And that's where the commentary, even though it can begin into something negative, is beautiful. I can give a talk, and it's going out to someone across the world. You know, someone who's on a ship in the South China Sea would write to me and say, hey, I heard your podcast. That's beautiful. I mean, the opportunity it gives us. Fulton Sheen, had to depend on people tuning in at a particular time and so on. Now that we can be 24/7 all over the world, it's a marvelous opportunity. We'd be derelict in our responsibility if we didn't use it as a church.
Yeah.
You know.
So, you know, I suppose the amazing reach and connections that you both have found using the digital space is probably a happy surprise. You know, you said you were thrilled with 300 views early on, and you know, the sheer numbers that you're attracting at this point are undoubtedly a happy surprise. What are some of the other surprises you've encountered as priests who are always at least knee deep in the internet? Good or bad surprises?
I always say twofold. One is, I am always really grateful when brother priests say, hey, I love what you do. Because that's, you know, I mean, in any kind of fraternity or any kind of group of people, there can always be the temptation or the fear that, am I sticking my head up too high? You know, that sense of, what do my peers, what do my brothers really think? Do they resent this? Do they, you know, dislike it? So whenever I have brother priests who say, I really love what you're doing, it helps, because there can be a certain sense of isolation, or perceived isolation, or perceived kind of, what are you trying to make yourself special? Sure. I'm like, I'm not. I was invited to do this, and I'm trying to do it. You know, so that's really helpful. The second thing is, there are so many times when I'll talk to young people who will say, "Oh, we watch your videos in religious ed or at our Catholic high school or wherever," and then I'll say, "Well, how many of you ever looked on your own?" And usually the number drops by about 90%. But then I realize there's all these volunteers in parishes and in schools and churches, religious ed programs all over the country, who they're in the relationship with these young people. And yep, here's a tool, and the tool is a video, or tool is a podcast, but they're the one who, they're walking in that messiness of young people's lives or people's lives. And I think that's incredible. I get to make a video, or I get to make a podcast, and then, go back to my ministry, which is very local. But then people doing their local ministry get to share this tool or share this video. And I just think it's still collaborative, even if we didn't even know we were working together. And I just, that always strikes me. I'm so grateful for those teachers and volunteers, and it's incredible.
Surprises, good or bad?
Yeah, I'll say something on the bad side maybe, because I've been extolling the virtues of social media, and I hold to that, absolutely. I use it, I think it's been marvelous. I must say, just over the years, I'm genuinely surprised by the amount of vitriol that you come across and the amount of just the meanness that can surface, in social media. And you do a video that you think is pretty harmless and benign, and oh my God, what are people saying here? And then that gives rise to counter. Some of that I have found at times even appalling, and the scapegoating that goes on, and all the studies now being done, especially how young people are often adversely affected by this environment that's created by social media, and the low self-esteem, and all of that. So I see that, and it's a very ugly side of social media. I've been on this Reddit AMA a few times, the Ask Me Anything. And on one hand, it's wonderful. The times I've done it, I think I've been second or third most popular in the country after Bernie Sanders and Jordan Peterson. And I say it not because they don't know me from Adam, but I just go on as Catholic bishop eager to talk to non-believers or something like that. Well, you get this enormous response, but you have to wade through just pools of vitriol and negativity and hatred to the church. You do indeed find good things. That's why I'm happy to do it. You find the questions have emerged. But there is a shadow side to it. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a shadow side to it. And I think those of us involved in the church have got to play a role in trying to address that, to teach people again how to have a real argument as opposed to just throwing mud around. I think a lot of people have forgotten what a real argument is. You've said something that I disagree with, and here's why, and here's my counter position, and I've drawn these conclusions, and it's not that very often. It's just some explosive ad hominem attack. So that side of it is bad. And I think we can play a role in trying to ameliorate that situation a bit.
Do you run into that as well?
I think there is that. One of the things that I'm grateful for is that there's a good team who kind of manage the YouTube channel and the page. And it's a situation where, there is the negativity, but I think that a lot of times I've developed a thicker skin, which is really good in the last number of years, where just okay, I realize that most people who are commenting or most people who are tweeting are having a bad day. Or they have what they're saying is not necessarily what they mean. It's coming from some other place. And so the stuff that sometimes bothers me more a little bit is when someone makes a response video kind of a situation where they kind of okay, I appreciate the discussion nature of it or having the argument part of it, but then I also think, well, shoot, do I jump back in and have my response to your response? And but that's okay though, because it means we're engaging, and I think that is the best.
Do you find this, that I have to almost tell myself in a very conscious way, okay, behind every comment, there's a person. Right. Because it's so hard. You see these sometimes brutally offensive words will appear. And you're like, what? And you're telling them, what? All right, behind those words, there's a person. As you say, maybe having a bad day, maybe coming out of
But who's engaged?
Right, who at least is there and is a child of God and is a human being. So one little discipline I imposed on myself a long time ago is whenever I respond, I try to say friend, comma.
Right.
And it's a signal to me, really, okay, this is a friend in Christ. This is someone that, there's a person behind those words. And sometimes, if someone's really just trolling, and you can tell that, I might do a teasing response. If someone has some terrible thing about how I'm this awful person and so on, I'll say, "Oh, so you really like me?" Huh? So I'll do that sort of thing sometimes just to be playful. But I try to say "friend" all the time, just to remind myself there's a person behind those those words.
Yeah, and I will often, if I can put that whoever is commenting in the place of, I think of a niece or a nephew that I've got, and if I can do that, then it's okay.
You hear
now I
that's good.
And that works for me every time, because my nieces and nephews, they have me wrapped around their finger, like I'll do anything for them. And so when I'm like, what the heck? I can't believe you're asking or challenging, or not challenging, but I can't believe you're saying this. I think, well, yeah, I can see if this nephew, if he was having a bad day, I could hear him say this.
That's a good way to think.
How to do this.
That's a good way to think about it.
My heart a lot.
But I mean, all of this drama and trauma and passion of online interaction. Is there a way to turn that into something more positive and useful? I mean, we've got such passion, so many people, responding, arguing, and then there it sits. Is there a way to turn that into something more positive or useful?
Well, I think so. I think we've been hitting on it really here. We've been talking about it. To turn a comment into an argument. In other words, see, I like the word argument. People say, "Oh, argument means you're being negative." No. To take in a comment and say, okay, let's bracket the vitriol. At the heart of what you're saying seems to be you're mad about this, right? Or you think the church is wrong about this particular. Am I saying that correctly? Do I have that right? And then send that back. So it's like you're turning the vitriol into more of an argument. And if the person, is responsible, and they might say, yeah, that's right. That's what I'm mad about. Okay, good. Now we can have more of a conversation. But if I respond with "What are you talking about?" well, that's not going to help. So I think you can discern within this sometimes messy communication something like a real argument, and then you can engage that creatively.
Well, I even find that when people get responded to, they will say, "I never thought you'd respond. I never thought you'd write back."
The temperature goes down right away.
Yeah. And I typically don't respond too much online. I will respond to every email I possibly can, and I try to stay away from social network messaging, just because it's another kind of like floodgate. I have a job to do. I mean, back in my diocese, there's still work that has to be done. And so, but when it comes to emails, I always want to respond, and especially for someone who is, like you mentioned, just passionate about this, whatever they're writing about. The response is almost always that, like, "Oh, so you heard me."
Right.
Like, yes. Hopefully you felt heard.
That's right.
I wanted to talk about the Bible. Over the last year and a half, both of your ministries have had incredible success with the Bible. Your podcast, which started this year, its success, kind of speaks for itself. There's so many people that I run into who are following along daily. The Word on Fire Bible is the first volume of that came out in 2020. We've had a hard time keeping it in stock, and we've had a lot of support for what will eventually be the additional 6 volumes, of this thing. 2 new creative approaches to the Bible. What prompted you to do that, to do something new with the Bible, and what does the success of these projects tell us about the hunger for knowledge and greater understanding of the Bible?
Go ahead.
Oh, I love the Word on Fire Bible. I really do. It's such a gift. I just love how what you design is it's accessible, elegant, and beautiful, and I just think that there's an element there that just is like. Is so important. I mentioned that I take in a lot of information audibly, and so, I sit down and I start reading and I fall asleep. It's one of those situations where I'm like, but I know that I find myself taking in a lot of. I found myself last year, or the year before, being really distracted by the amount of voices I was allowing into my mind, into my heart. And they were wise voices. I mean, people saying smart things, saying wise things, but also it was the wisdom of the world rather than the wisdom of the Lord. And I recognized that. And I just thought, okay, I'm being distracted. I'm kind of feeling distressed, because also how culture is going, how the church is going, how our country is going, there was an element there where I was just like, I want to fight. And realizing, I was reading the book of Judges at the time, like reading with my eyes. And I was reading going, oh, this is nothing new. In fact, it was worse. There are times in our history where it was not just a year or two or a season, it was generations.
It's the most brutal book in the Bible, I think, Judges. It's
and just chaos.
Book in the Bible.
Yeah, and you're like, this is the people of God, though. And they're going through chaos, generations of chaos.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is nothing new. And so then I thought, it just was the Lord, I think, speaking, saying, well, you take in information through your ears, and the Bible will offer an eternal perspective on our temporary situations. And I thought, I would love to be able to have a podcast where we just went through every day and let people, like, really, truly, the book From Christendom to Apostolic Mission by Hugh Mary. Yeah. Oh gosh, so good. But one of the elements of that is we need to recover a biblical worldview. Yeah. And I thought maybe this could be the case. And so I wrote to Ascension and said, what do you think about this? And they said, we think that's a great idea. Let's do it. And so
yeah,
started.
Heck, I'll return the compliment. I think your podcast was just so inspired. And, as my brother said, the success speaks for itself. So that's marvelous. My inspiration was Vatican II. Vatican II called for a revival in the Bible. And my conviction is it didn't happen. My generation, probably yours too, we got such a steady diet of the historical critical method.
Yeah.
So we read the Bible, in an intelligent way, but through very particular lenses, which tended to look at, the intention of the human author of the text. So it gave you a historical sense. But I think what we lost was the overview of the whole Bible, the narrative that God is telling. What's God's intention, through these great stories? My other experience, I don't know if you've shared this, but all my years of being a priest, and you sit down after the opening prayer, and it's now time for the first reading, and here's a reading from the book of, the prophet Isaiah, or a book for the book of Judges, or reading from, and the reading unfolds, and you think, the people have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea what's being said. And it's not to blame the people at all. We get this little, segment from an obscure book from long ago. So I remember thinking, we got to find a way to open up the Bible, with all of its richness. And a lot of people, I think of Jeff Cavins, and his Bible program was, I think, very important in that way. What you're doing. I think the Word on Fire Bible, that was our inspiration, was to now let's present the Bible, but now with art and with commentary and with all kinds of stuff that would draw people into it. But it's Vatican II is my inspiration. And I think it's of the Holy Spirit, these efforts to bring the Bible to people.
Yeah.
What I think people would be interested in how you work a little bit. They see you in the videos and all that. How does that work? You're doing it primarily from your residence.
Yeah. A lot of times, what comes up in video topics and whatnot, or video topics. We'll just say that video topics is the questions that my students are asking me. It comes out of a conversation with somebody or multiple conversations, and I realize, this is on the heart of the people who are living on this campus. And that most often is the genesis of a lot of the topics or content that we post.
And you're doing a lot of your videos from a studio close to your residence?
Yeah, now we have a studio in Santa Barbara. When I first started, you mentioned Siskel and Ebert. They would always be like in a movie theater. I started them at the auditorium at Mundelein, where I was a teacher. We had this old-fashioned auditorium, and I sat in one of the chairs there, and we filmed the commentary. Then we did them in the office in Chicago, in Skokie. Then I did them in my rector's office when I was rector there. Then out in Santa Barbara, first in my room, and now in the studio. So different places. Mine come out of my columns. So like every week or 10 days, I'll write a column about something. And they often come from either my own reading, my own read of the situation, or the Word on Fire staff. So I'll turn to Father Steve and say, what should I write about? Or I'll call Brandon, or I'll call someone and say, what's going on that I should write about? And they often make a suggestion. And then I do the video based usually on the column. And it's important because there's a danger, I think, of we could just start bazooing. So let me sit down and let me tell you my feeling about blah, blah, blah. But I always make sure that mine have a structure. And so then I take from the column, we do little kind of bullet points on a cue card. So usually when I'm talking to the camera, there's a little bullet points next to me. So at least I've got a sense of the structure of it. That's how I do it.
But, regardless of the backdrop, the lighting, the cameras, it's the evangelist that makes the difference. And regardless of, any of those backdrops, you guys have been terrific in conveying, the message, the truth. And as we're closing here, I just wanted to ask a quick question that may seem impertinent, but I think people would be interested in the answer, and it may be a quick answer. What are you trying to do? What is your mission? What are you trying to do with these evangelistic outreaches?
Well, I can put it in terms of my talk tomorrow, which is why we evangelize. And two things: to get people out of hell and to tell them who their Lord is. And what I mean by that is to, yes, in the full eschatological sense, to keep people out of hell, but also to draw them out of the hell that exists even now. So all of us sinners are in hell to varying degrees. And a good evangelist is trying to show there's a path out of that. And it's called Jesus Christ. And if you enter into the power of Jesus Christ, there's a path out of the hell you're in. And then secondly, to know who your Lord is. So everyone, Bob Dylan, you got to serve somebody. And no matter who you are, you might think you're autonomous. No one's autonomous. We're all serving somebody. And he's quite right. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. So which arm are you in? Whom do you serve? That's why I evangelize. Get people out of hell and tell them who their Lord is.
Father Mike, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I remember. So my patron saint when I was confirmed was St. Francis Xavier, and who was patron saint of missionaries. Yeah. And I chose him because of that, because he's patron saint of missionaries. I remember when I was, I think 17 or 18 years old, I was a part of this evening program that the local community was hosting, and they wanted to be able to introduce me somehow. And they said, "This is Mike Schmitz. His parents are, and he does these sports. And what's your goal in life?" And in my kind of, youthful zeal, I said, I want to bring as many souls to heaven as possible. And the woman who announced it, her interpretation was, he wants to help people. but I'm like, that's it. Why, there's no greater thing. Just that same exact, souls. It's to save souls, bring as many souls to heaven as possible. And I think, just to play a small part in that.
Yeah, no, it's a big question, and I assumed that the answer would actually be simple, in both cases, and it is. We have come to the end of our time here, and I know both of you are going to be busy in the next couple of days here at the Good News Conference. We wish you luck with your keynotes and all your other activities, and again, we can't thank you enough for setting aside the time for this conversation. So that is all from Orlando at this point. Thank you very much.